Matt, in trying to perceive what aesthetic cognitivism could mean, you've put forth the provocative idea that art can be a way to ameliorate problems between different religious groups, or to bridge divisions between them. How so?
Well, it's not a kumbaya thesis in the sense that art will make us all get along, as much as it is, not that you're suggesting that, but that might be a way it could be misperceived. What I'm saying is Christian divisions, to take one religion in particular, the divisions...
With a lot of divisions.
Yeah, there sure are. We could cover them all, but within Christianity, the divisions are primarily along verbal theological fault lines. That is, these verbal confessions that divide Protestants from Catholics, or Orthodox from Catholics. And art is almost like a thread in stitching a wound together. It plays on both sides. The double nave churches of Crete, where Orthodox and Roman Catholic worship side by side. The churches in Germany, where the Holy Roman Emperor permitted Lutherans and Catholics to switch out their services. All of these moments that we don't look to because, well, they're divided verbally. But visually, in some senses, architecturally, sometimes they're united.
Okay. Now, in some cases, there's dispute about icons and the meaning of images between the three big divisions you talked about: Catholicism, Eastern Orthodox, and Protestantism in general. And so the radically different approach to images.
Exactly. Let me be a little cheeky. I'll describe to you a religion that uses menacingly bulbous, hyper-physical, three-dimensional images, and it's called orthodoxy. And everyone's like, no. Orthodoxy uses flat icons. No, I can show you sculptural images in the Orthodox Church. Or I'll give you another example. There is a religion that took a image of the Virgin Mary that was being used in a menacingly idolatrous way, and they removed that image. And then
how did it look? Why was it menacingly?
Because people were focusing upon it so intently. They were caring more about this image of the Virgin Mary than they cared about the Eucharist, and they cared about the sermon. And so they removed the image, and then these reformers came through and paved the entire church with images from the Old Testament prohibition of idolatry. And I am speaking about Catholicism. That happened in Siena before the Reformation. And the image I'm referring to is Duccio's Maestà. Alexander Nagel, a great art historian, has uncovered this. He's like, yeah, what you thought Protestants did, Catholics did too. The whitewashing of churches, Catholics did that too. And then Protestants, of course, David Morgan's research has shown this, have constantly used images of Jesus. We think, well, no, they don't do that. But they did, and they constantly do, especially in 19th century America. Images of Jesus in Protestant situations abound. So these categories we have of the imageless Protestants and the idolatrous Catholics and the pure icon-loving Orthodox, they just don't play out art historically.
Yeah, but because you've said that, those are the perceptions, and that's the stereotype?
It is, and art history annihilates that stereotype if you actually spend the time with these congregations. I'll give you a crazy example. The iconostasis in Orthodoxy is a huge screen of images of all these different icons of the saints. I can give you an evangelical example of that. I was at an evangelical museum once, and I saw a beautiful screen of digital images of the global church throughout the world in HD. And it was towering. I'm like, I'm in an iconostasis all over again. To say nothing of the fact that evangelicals are always using images of Jesus and the Jesus Storybook Bible to catechize their children, the stuff that Protestants aren't supposed to do. Art history complicates these questions about tidy religious division.
It just seems to show the tendency of all human beings to wrestle with the same kinds of issues.
Right, exactly.
But how does that resolve divisions? It just shows that they're all confused.
Or does it show that we are wrestling with the same dilemmas that come from the fact that, according to Christianity, God became flesh. And therefore, you can't just communicate about him verbally. You have to communicate about him visually, because at the end of the day, the body of Jesus is a visual phenomenon as well. And so you could say they're all confused, but you could also say that these three separations within Christianity are all grappling with the same mystery of the Incarnation. And even though the theologians might say, well, this is the neatly packaged, zip-locked Orthodox theology, there are other traditions that have been availing themselves of that wisdom in the same way.
We've been talking about the image of Jesus, which obviously is core, but there are other images that are used. You have saints, you have certain colorations of windows, which are emotionally attached to a religious experience.
Yeah.
You have a setting of an altar in different kinds of churches. Anglican certainly has that. You have depictions in some cases of God the Father in different ways. So, I mean, so it's not only Jesus, you have these other kinds of depictions as well. So how does that affect the whole analysis?
I've got some good news and bad news in that regard. Maybe the good news would be that Bridget Heal's research, an art historian, has shown that when a Catholic Church became Lutheran in Nuremberg, for example, in the 16th century, there was a huge, beautiful image carved in wood of the Virgin Mary and the angel of the Annunciation. And you'd think they'd take it down, right? Because goodbye Virgin Mary, now you're Lutheran. They said, don't you dare touch it. The Virgin Mary's all over the New Testament. She has to stay there. So that's in some senses one of the glorious sides of it, is that Protestants, even in the Reformed tradition in the North and the Netherlands, don't touch that image of the Virgin Mary way up there in the window because she has value. And sometimes you'd have a little image of a peasant woman suckling a child in a whitewashed Calvinist church, and obviously we're dealing with, in some senses, a surrogate Virgin Mary. So that's the good side. The downside, I think, is that in their unfortunate decision to depict God the Father in the domes of the churches, for example, at the Berliner Kirche in Berlin, of course, the great Berliner Dome there, we have God the Father up at the top. It's an unfortunate choice for Protestants. Why are you depicting him that way? And at the top of St. Peter's, you have God the Father in the oculus. Why are you doing that? Or Orthodox churches, which they say they don't do it. Of course they do it. It's all over Russia and Greece, images of God the Father. And I think in some senses, that is a universal mistake of reducing God to this circumscribed being, which in the first person of the Trinity, according to universal Christian theology, he is not. And all three traditions make that mistake, and I think they make it because they want to have this God for themselves and say, hey, we've got the answers and you don't. So I think that's an error that we share, and in so doing...
So you're perfectly comfortable with not having images of the first person of the Trinity, but having zillions of images of the second person of the Trinity, and this is a coherent position.
I would say I'm comfortable with having, at best, indirect images of the first person of the Trinity. Because when you think that the infinite can be contained, I mean, a retinal image is a really reduced phenomenon. People have seen the images of the black hole that have been taken. Do you think you understand the complexity and immensity of a black hole if you look at a quick picture on your screen? Of course not. In the same way, you have this way of imparting Christianity. Oh, God's just this being out there. And so I think that's a mistake that atheists have absorbed, and they disbelieve in that God. And I want to say to them, I'm responsible, my Christian tradition is responsible for bequeathing that unfortunate depiction to you. Please forgive us. We made that mistake, and you inherited it from us. You look up at the Sistine Chapel and see this bearded guy reaching out, and you're like, oh, that must be what God is. I don't think we found that being.